Welcome to the Main Street Business Inside Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wagner, Chief Program Officer at Main Street America, a nonprofit leading a collaborative movement dedicated to strengthening communities through place-based economic development and community preservation. Each week, join me as I travel the country and take a deep dive into the personal journeys of downtown and neighborhood entrepreneurs, the stories that far too often go unnoticed and unheard. Whether you're a small business owner who wants to learn from your peers or a community leader looking to better support your local business base, Main Street Business Insights is here to provide you with the tools, strategies, and personal stories to help you and all of your Main Street businesses thrive. So subscribe now and tune in every Wednesday to get inspired by the individuals driving our communities forward. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Main Street Business Inside Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wagner, Chief Innovation Officer at Main Street America. And if you listened to last week's show about sort of holiday data trends and a little bit of sneak peek to our 2025 fall survey, where we asked small businesses, our Main Street businesses, about sort of holiday preparation, this week's episode, I've got a special guest, our very own Mike Powe, who is the Senior Director of Research, is going to be popping on and joining me, where we're going to take a deeper dive into all the other findings from the survey that we did basically through the month of October. I also want to point out that for us, this is a very sort of special survey that we do, in that it really gives voice to what we think of is kind of the real Main Street businesses, not so much the kind of government data, SBA, less than 500 employees, U.S. Chamber, National, Retail Federation. You can name all the acronyms where they'll talk about Main Street businesses, but I think when you think about authenticity and really trying to define the characteristics, that's where we play out. And so let me first welcome Mike to the stage, to the broadcast. Mike, good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
All right. This is our second time. We're not quite like it's Saturday Night Live host status yet in terms of repeat. If you know Ross Chanowski from newmarket.com, he's been on a couple times. Now Mike's on a couple times. So we've got a little bit of competition going there.
No
probably like to see both of them more so than me. So Mike, I was telling those that are listening or watching on the YouTube or any other sort of podcast outlet that what I think is really interesting about all the surveys we've done since really 2020, that's where we got our launch 5.5 years ago. And you can give certainly all the stats of all the businesses and everything else there, but is really what makes this survey different, and I think of value to whether it's the media, government agencies, small business, advocates out there, is that it really is the voice and defines where small businesses are feeling at the moment and what some of their concerns and challenges, but also where perhaps they see opportunities and highlights. It also helps us in terms of where we might be able to work with local programs and our coordinating programs to design programs or more education and training. So it's a really important survey that we do two times a year. And so I was hoping maybe we could get started with you walking us through sort of what are the characteristics of a Main Street business as we see it in our survey. And I'm going to put up for the viewers on YouTube, I'm going to put up some slides to kind of help guide us through that conversation. So Mike, let me turn it over to you on this question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, Main Street America has had a pretty successful run of surveys, have really excellent outreach. We hear from a lot of folks across the United States and across our network every time we do one of these surveys. So real shout out to local Main Street leaders and to the coordinating program staff who help us get the word out. I think we have a larger sample size than almost any other organization that does surveys like this. We all heard from 1,295 business owners this time around with the survey open for just 3 weeks. pretty exceptional. And I just really want to express that gratitude for everyone to kind of help us hear these voices.
Yeah, great
So
point.
who we hear from, what a Main Street business is, yeah, first and foremost, I think you're kind of articulating this already, Matt, that these are, whether you want to call them micro businesses or mom and pops or like local independents, these are very small businesses. They're almost three quarters have fewer than three full-time employees. I think the vast majority, I can't remember the numbers, like 85, more than 85%, have fewer than 10, including temporary, seasonal, part-time employees. So extremely small businesses in terms of their staff. Um, the kinds of businesses we hear from, I think it's interesting that when we think about main streets, when I think about a main street district, we tend to think of retail and food and beverage businesses, and those are the two dominant types you can see in the chart if you're on YouTube. So about 62%, a little more than 60% are either retail business or a food and beverage business. If you look at the broader sort of data from other sources and look at Main Street districts, we tend to have an underrepresentation in our surveys from professional services, from scientific, technical kind of organizations, from banks, and from um,
Like
one or two other
professional services or personal care, barber salons, like that kind of
personal care.
stuff.
Yeah, personal care is definitely underrepresented as well. So 7% of the respondents to this survey were in the personal services category: salons, barbershops, tattoo parlors, spas. I think that's actually about 14% when we look at main streets with the
Okay.
sort of third party data. But that's touching the weeds. Um, so we heard from a lot of retail businesses. We heard from a lot of food and beverage businesses, among other categories. We asked her the first time about the price range of offerings, so about what general level products or services were priced, and two-thirds, really neatly, two-thirds said had mid-range prices. A quarter said they were affordable or low cost, and just under 10% said they were luxury or high end. And that we'll get into it maybe, but there's some interesting kind of cross-tab data. You can
Yeah.
put these sources together in conversation. So
Yeah.
that's off the top. That's some of the characteristics we see. And just keep going, or do you want to prime this
Yeah,
up?
I was just gonna say that one of the other things, and what I love about this particular slide, again, if you're looking at YouTube, and we'll go through each one in particular, is that the other kind of characteristic that I think a lot of people, if you say the word Main Street business, local ownership tends to be one of those, like there's a thread line of local, like of place based, obviously, being significant to how those businesses are defined, no matter what kind of stakeholder you are, and in particular how they support local communities. And I think all of us may have like a sort of memory growing up, and I'll like age myself, but I remember like Little League Baseball, and you wore the shirt of like that local Main Street business. Mine was Kay's Hamburgers. And I will never forget that many decades later. And it wasn't because of my greatness in baseball. So I'll just sort of leave it there relative to you diving into some other key facts about Main Street businesses.
Yeah, and I want to give a hat tip or kudos to my colleague Amy Morita, who designed these graphics and really designed the survey, and give a kind of hat tip or shout out to Kelly Hummerhauser, our director of government relations, who really helped us realize we've never asked these questions about local economic impacts. And to your point, so this time, yeah, we had a list of check boxes like, what ways do you support the local economy? 70% said they contribute to local causes, probably including, I think, still probably little league
Yeah.
business, little league teams. I hope that's true. My kids don't play little league yet, but we'll see. 63% said they hire locally. I think more than 50% said they use local vendors and support the local Main Street program. So yeah, there's this effectively symbiotic relationship between Main Street businesses, Main Street communities and their local economies, Main Street programs. Really creates a healthy, lovable place overall.
Yeah, it really does. Again, you can talk about size, you can talk about like revenues and things, but when it gets to the heart of it, as we think about community, that's really defining thing. Like there's this amazing intersectionality between these local Main Street businesses and sort of the quality of place that people feel about their downtown or neighborhood commercial district as a result of this connection between the two. And you see this really show up, I think, in these questions. So it's a really powerful way to get at that. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Well, there's one more amendment. So another way that the local shows up, and it's sort of you could have different perspectives on it, but the degree to which these businesses rely on in-person traffic,
Yeah.
right? So we saw still about half of Main Street businesses don't use e-commerce or online sales at all. They're just physical shops or physical, people to spend time with when you're purchasing goods or services. I think that's kind of striking, and it does feel like Main Street. It does feel like
Yeah.
the image of Main Street. Maybe there's more opportunity to. I don't know. I don't. I'm sort of like puzzled by the e-commerce piece. Maybe there's opportunity to generate more revenue using e-commerce and online sales. Maybe not. Maybe that's my perspective
Yeah.
from Seattle. It's kind of clouding it. Yeah.
And it may be we could really go deep here because this also gets into sort of the realm of how we think about civic infrastructure and people going into a store and feeling like they're part of something, they're part of community by being there. And then you've got the whole business revenue side of technology enhancements as they come, whether we also have some AI questions in there. Like so this one in particular is very deep,
Yeah. Yeah.
and is giving us a lot of fodder for future discussions. I think as we look at this data.
I do want to, folks will see it already on the slide. First of all, I got that stat wrong. It was 82% of fewer than 10 employees. But the fact that almost three-quarters of respondents are women, we kind of get that again and
Yeah,
again and again. That stands apart from SBA data, other sorts of data sources, and it probably stands a factor of Main Street businesses that are just different than small businesses at large. This
yeah,
women ownership is really um, it's just a fact of the matter. It seems like the number of surveys that have expressed this. And then the revenue piece, yeah, I think we've kind of already spoken enough about the size of businesses when it comes to employees, but more than half of these businesses have annual revenue below $200,000 a year. So yeah, tend to be small in terms of staff, tend to be small in terms of their overall sort of economic impact directly.
Mike, I know with the survey, when the team was looking things over, that there were kind of like three items that really popped out, along with kind of the holiday preparations. And one is based on a question that we've been asking for really a number of the surveys around like confidence. We've started to ask more questions around like profitability and revenues to better understand, especially some of the things like tariffs and consumer confidence, so that we can get some insights there. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the data points to relative to these kinds of challenges.
Yeah, sure. So this issue, the challenges with revenue and profit, I think really inform the data about business confidence. If we go to the next slide, yeah, we'll see some of this very clearly. So in the October survey, this fall survey, we asked over the previous 3 months, how did your revenue and net profit, how did that sort of trend? And about 40%, so 38% said the revenue had decreased. That's about the same as it was in the spring, and 45% said their net profits had decreased between August and October. And again, it's pretty comparable. It's a little bit lower than it was in the spring survey, but pretty comparable.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think generally the overall takeaway is that these are difficult times for Main Street business owners. It's not across the board. You can see in these charts that more than half had stable or increasing revenue, close to half had stable or increasing profit. But to have 40%, give or take, about 40% having a decrease, reflect some hardship. And I'll just note also, is we asked the same question in the spring survey that we sent out in April. So that was reflecting data from generally, February to April. And the numbers being about the same there suggests that we are seeing a lot of businesses that have had pretty steady decline in revenue and profit over the course of a longer stretch of time. So,
Yeah, yeah. And it
yeah,
seems like when looking at the two of them in comparison, where you see the higher numbers on the net profitability in terms of decreasing numbers, that is, that
yeah,
that there's seems to be a lot of pricing pressures in terms of like inventory and other kinds of related expenses
right.
versus the revenue side. I know you guys also kind of like broke this one out in some really interesting cross tabs because, yeah, we're showing you general numbers, but as you dive deeper, you do see some distinctions.
Yeah. So to get into those a little bit, if this is showing 58% of all respondents had steady or increasing revenue. And if we look at other types of businesses, for instance, retail and food and beverage tended to do a little bit worse looking at the overall picture. 55% of those businesses said they had steady or increasing revenue. And you compare that to professional services businesses. So those are, you know, accountants, banks, payroll, legal. Those businesses are doing kind of, better. I don't know how to characterize it, but certainly the numbers are higher. So 62% of those professional services businesses had steady or increasing revenues. I think the dimension of the number of full-time staff is really powerful. Of course, we don't hear from as many businesses that have more than 5 or more than 10 full-time staff. But among those that have more than 10, more than three-quarters had increasing or steady revenues, compared
Mm,
to 55% with those who had fewer than 3 full-time staff, which again is the bulk of our respondents. We can see other data about long-established businesses tended to have um, more diminished revenue. 57% of those had steady or increasing revenue compared to 62% of those newer businesses. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of shout it. I think we'll get into it more, but local support from a local Main Street program seems to make a difference in the data as well.
that's
Um,
I gotta admit. I mean, I
right.
know we're we are insiders, uh, but that just seems tremendous to me, and I think just demonstrates the power of our local Main Street directors, their engagement. I don't know, Mike, if you remember back in the first survey, or maybe it was the second one because we did like 5 during the pandemic, but there was a
Yeah.
question in one of the surveys around like the trust factor in the relationships. Like, where do you
Yeah.
go to for sources of information or resources, etc. And Main Street's like jumped off the charts, and this really shows up now in the revenue
Yeah.
and net profitability side of it.
Yeah. I remember that survey was more than chambers of commerce and more than local government, more than sort of
Small
SBD.
business development centers.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
crazy. All right. I'm going to go over to the confidence side, which is something else we've been seeing some trend lines over time.
Right. So between fall 2022 and spring 2024, we saw averages that were about 7.6 out of 10 when we asked the question, how confident are you of your business's success over the next 3 months? And then since then, we've seen the numbers drop. So 7.2 was the average in fall of 2024. And then in spring, it really dropped down to 6.7 out of 10. That was our historic low point. What we're seeing in fall 2025 is the second lowest over this period of 7 surveys at 7.0. So it is rebounding somewhat, but not reaching those levels that we saw in
Okay.
years past. Yeah.
Okay. And I know because we love to geek out on the research side that you also did some cross tabs here to see if there are some distinctions amongst Main Street businesses.
Yeah, and this is a lot of echoing what we saw with the revenue. I think really if you do the ultimate crosstab is looking at how businesses revenue did over the previous 3 months compared to their confidence, it's a huge predictor. So that's why there's consistency here. Professional services businesses had really high confidence, a 7.9 average compared to the average overall of 7.0. You look down the line, actually, one that I'll kind of call out, or two that I'll call out. Well, I'll go three, I'll call out. How about that? So, producers of packaged goods. So, if small scale manufacturers had higher confidence by almost half a point,
Wow.
if you produce packaged good versus not. And at your point about the sort of revenue and profit, just looking
Yeah.
at the crosstabs there, we saw that producers had higher increases, and they more of them had revenue increases,
Okay.
but they had the exact same number of profit increases,
Mm.
which to me indicates the effect of tariffs, the effect of the supply chain. The materials that are going into those packaged goods cost more, so they're having to recoup that in higher revenues, but the profits are the same. I think is
Yeah. Probably have a
roughly.
lot more sort of inputs into one product. Yeah.
We see the support from the local Main Street program gave almost a full point bump. If you get support from the local Main
Staggering.
Street director, yeah, 7.4 versus 6.5 if you do not. And then I want to go back to year established. It's kind of interesting if you, even if and we won't flip back and forth, we don't have to do that. But we saw in the data just a second ago that businesses launched before 2016 had lower proportions of those businesses had increased or stable revenues. But we see in the confidence data that businesses established before 2016 have higher confidence than businesses launched during 2020 or later. There's
Do
kind
you
of an
think that's like,
interesting,
do you
yeah.
think it's because they've been through maybe? I mean, if you remember like the Great Recession in, 08, 09, and some other downturns, I wonder if there's some reflection of, well, I've been through this before. We made it, we survived. And that for a lot of people, and that had a really good economy for a long period of time. So maybe, yeah, it's new.
I think also if your business has been open for 10 years, you may not need the same level of revenue to feel very confident.
True.
Yeah, you
True.
may have paid off a lot of your debts, hopefully.
Exactly. Exactly.
So it's not as urgent. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the second big finding, aha moment, whatever we want to call it here, but where there is, and I've always said this, like, Main Street and Main Street businesses in particular don't exist within a bubble. They're impacted by not only local dynamics, but certainly more macro, societal, economic, or even technology shifts that happen. And it seems like some of that played out in the data. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the things that you all were seeing.
Yeah, and here we're leaning on a new approach with our surveys. So in the past, we'd ask which of these are concerns of your business, and we have multi-select checkboxes. These days, we're leaning a lot more on open-ended questions because we have the benefit of I'm not, I'm no longer an AI evangelist, but AI is extremely helpful for qualitative analysis. So we can ask a lot of open-ended questions. What's something you're proud of that your business accomplished in the last 12 months? What's the biggest challenge you faced in the last 12 months? How are you gearing up for the holiday season? How are your preparations for the holidays different than they've been in the past? How would you explain the confidence rating that you provided? We even ran a follow-up survey that was focused on impacts of the government shutdown. So we sort of have 5 or 6 open-ended questions, especially if you include the open comment field. And the thing
Okay.
looking across all of that data, I think I have another slide maybe that shows this, is that so often, no matter the question, people's responses pointed to instability of some sort,
Hmm.
whether it's economic, social, political, environmental, different factors that impacted things. So across all those open-ended questions, we had something like 4,500 quotes effectively across our open-ended
Instability.
questions. 30% of them mentioned something to do with these sort of broad societal trends. And so I
Wow.
think we'll
Yeah.
go through some quotes here in a second. But yeah, it's pretty striking. So I'll just keep going with it. So I'm not going to read these quotes. If you're on YouTube, you can read them. I guess I should kind of paraphrase them in some detail for folks
Yeah.
who are.
Yeah. Let's hear
Yeah.
what Tom have to say.
When we asked what the top, an accomplishment someone's proud of over the previous 12 months, we heard things about growing despite an unstable business and investment climate. That was a business in Washington, or staying afloat during a very inflationary period, a retailer in Tennessee. When we asked about challenges businesses had faced, certainly heard, I think this was the one where we heard more than half of them mentioned something to do with sort of these broad trends. Whether it's an Oklahoma food and beverage business saying their workers can't work the weekends or in evenings because there's no affordable childcare.
Oh, wow.
There's a business in Missouri that said the cost of living is so high that the bookings have really slowed down. There's a personal services business in California who mentioned losing a staff member to immigration enforcement, putting a real human face to some of these kind of
Yeah,
challenges
yeah.
that are in the news constantly. In Ohio, an arts and entertainment business said they've lost state funding for local low income families to attend art classes and art camps. A Florida grocery retailer mentioned inflation and the government shutdown. I think this was a business near where there's a lot of federal workers. In
Okay.
Iowa, there's someone who said people are losing their jobs, they're unsure of the rising prices with tariffs, and they're not spending the same amount of money as on non-essentials.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to call out that, we had a lot of discussions in the spring survey because that's many of you remember in like April 6th, I think was the day, the big announcement on tariffs. And throughout, whether it was consumer confidence numbers or what have you, um, we could never kind of like get to the point because there was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of announcements, and then there might be a lot of time before those announcements actually then sort of trickle
Yeah,
to what is the outcome of those policy shifts, or again societal shifts, or what have you. Even when you think about technology shifts, they take a little while, even though they may be in the mass media or what have you. And I
yeah,
think what all we could get out of that was, yeah, maybe there's some concern, but I think with the qualitative side, what you really understand is sort of the nuance, the how they're thinking about it or how they're reacting to it, much more than you can get from just sort of like a yes, no, or a sort of Likert scale of, somewhat or what have
yeah,
you.
yeah.
That's why I really love the qualitative.
Yeah, I think the factors are all sort of tangled together too, right? It's
Yeah.
hard to know whether it's tariffs or supply chain or, other businesses closing down or these issues about, workers and childcare. It's when we ask a totally open-ended question, I think you get um, more granularity. And the granularity, it's interesting that there's so many different things mentioned that are all underlying factors. So that's why I feel like articulating it as sort of instability or tumult or sort of, just
Yes.
like
Yeah.
this change. It's just hard to kind of
Kind of put your finger on.
find the ground or find your feet on the ground. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Put your
Yeah.
finger on it.
I think it's natural inclination to be looking at what's the one thing that's causing all this, and what you can see in this. It's just that it's multiple. Like if we would have asked a straight question, you would still be wondering in many
Yeah.
respects. And I think what this illuminates is there are many factors, even many that maybe we weren't aware of.
And,
So
and even I think the fact that it comes up with the confidence questions, it comes up with these like top challenge questions, it
mhm,
comes up with the sort of your wins or accomplishments from the year. That
yeah,
also speaks to the way it's sort of like it's in the water a little bit, um,
yeah.
unfortunately.
We've got a few others that talk about like low confidence. You want to discuss those, Mike?
Yeah, I don't think we need to belabor it, but yeah, so businesses that said they had a confidence score of between 1 and 6 is sort of segmented and looked at those,
Okay.
written responses. I can see that in blurry. Let me fix my image if I can. But so I thought this quote from a Washington retailer was especially interesting. That they said everything seems to turn political. That it's hard to even post photos of books on social media without angering someone. I think that speaks to a real. It's hard for me to say. To me, it reads as real as really a Mean Street kind of message. Like I
Yeah.
can relate to that. I can understand in conversations I've had with local directors across the country, across the network. I can hear how that kind of comes up, becomes a real
Yeah.
challenge. So,
You're right. Okay. This is on the
yeah.
average confidence sign. Anything jumps out, or one or two quotes there?
On average confidence, yeah, I think it was people talking about people just not spending as much, people worried about the economy, consumer confidence. When it comes to high confidence, people would say they've been through things like this, but they've been through difficult times before, and so they're confident they'll persevere. That was a Maryland healthcare business or a Florida professional services business. So they've been in business since 1978. We'll all
Okay.
pull through this, but the fact that they're sort of alluding to the underlying stress in the system, yeah,
Yeah, there's sort of like there's a recognition that there's something happening here, but we've been there, we've been through it, and so we'll be just fine. So I can see where that again that matches with sort of the age of the business as well.
and not to belabor that, but that like the confidence question, is
Mhm.
purely we ask that confidence score 1 through 10. How confident are you of your success looking at the next few months? And then we ask, why did you choose that number? Tell us more. And so the fact that it's coming up there really purely unprompted, I think speaks to it
Yeah.
being, yeah, sort of in the water.
Yeah. Well, the last finding that we wanted to talk about here on the podcast was around small business owners who receive support, which we sort of alluded to a little bit from their local main streets, have higher confidence in their business's success. And I wonder if you could sort of speak
Yeah,
to that.
we previewed this a little bit already in some of the earlier slides, but in
Yeah.
some of the findings. But so if someone said they got support from a local Main Street program, almost a full point higher in confidence, which is really a big swing. It's pretty notable, and 11% more of those businesses that got support from a local Main Street program, so they had stable or increasing revenues. I think kind of Matt, you said it well. It's one thing to say that Main Street programs are a trusted source and a source of counsel and support, but to see it show up in the numbers like this, and this is, crosstabs analysis, looking at
Yeah.
combining the two questions. So it's not as though it was prompted or asked, more directly. I think there really is something going on here, and it reflects the power of Main Street, the impact of Main Street, that folks feel like they have someone in their corner. So I pulled a few quotes here, and I just feel a little like on the nose for Main Street America to be touting, but if
That's all
there's a
right.
push
Our
to
show.
shop locally, yeah, which the shop locally knocked off of big boxes or online giants. That was a Florida retailer. An Oregon food and beverage business owner said that they serve on their local board and they appreciate the Main Street, all they do for small businesses and especially those women-owned businesses. And a Kentucky business, just retailer said, "Love our Main Street programs, help to grow the business." I think that is sort of the story of Main Street, and so,
I
it's
agree.
just yeah, it's wonderful to see the results play out that way, and I hope it, puts some wind in the sails for folks, especially with the holiday season right upon us.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Mike, I know we had talked earlier, and I think one of the sort of consistent with that last slide is just also a big shout out to the Main Street directors and our coordinating programs that help us in so many ways to achieve the survey numbers that we do. And again, I think showcases how that sets us apart in many ways to have these champions, these local champions that have these great, wonderful relationships in many respects with small business owners that help us to get close to 1,300 surveys and 25,000 or so over time. It's a sort of a wealth of knowledge that we're able to gain, and hopefully that then becomes reflective in the kinds of tools and trainings and resources that we can provide. So thank you once again. And as always, Mike, for all the great work from you and your team and for being on the show and talking a little bit about our data. So just kind of like close things out. Once again, make sure you check out the blog. And also, I just want to do, this has all really been about. You can see some of the confidence, some of the real challenges relative to net profitability and revenue streams. And I want to quickly mention that one of the things that we all can do in a very short period of time is think about the holidays and where we're supporting, where we're putting our dollars. And I just want to do a quick shout out to American Express and Small Business Saturday. It's one of the biggest events from a holiday and a retail time of the year, I guess you could say, when so many retailers, restaurants, businesses overall are so dependent on those dollars. It's where a lot of them, it can be the make or break time for their, fiscal year. And we're so proud of our partnership with American Express with Small Business Saturday. And last week, if you listened to the show where we announced the Amex Shop Small Grants program in support of small businesses around the country. So a quick shout out there. And then I'll just kind of conclude with, hope you enjoyed the show, all the great insights from Mike and his team, that you can use that data, whether you're a small business owner, to just kind of better understand maybe that you're not alone, but also, how you compare to sort of your small business colleagues. And if you're a small business serving organization or a Main Street program, things that maybe you can focus in on from a technical assistance or education and training perspective as well. And obviously to consumers out there, shop small, support local, and continue to listen to the show because this really does provide a voice for sort of authentic and true Main Street businesses out there. So Mike, once again, thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe and catch us on the next episode, of course. And whether you're listening to YouTube or whatever stream you are, thanks so much for all your support.